In the town of Millbrook Falls, Vermont, there was a man named Walter Hollis who could hear things other people could not. A string, a hair's width out of tune. A hammer felt gone soft with age. The tiny, almost imperceptible groan of a soundboard settling into a new season. Walter was a piano tuner, and for 49 years he carried his tuning kit from house to house, church to church, school to school, setting right the small dissonances that everyone else had simply learned to live with. He was 19 years old when he first knocked on the door of Voss Piano Repair, a narrow brick shop on Chestnut Street, with a bell that never quite rang true. The owner, a widower named Emmett Voss, looked him over, handed him a tuning fork and said, "Let's see if you've got the ear for it." Walter had the ear for it. What he did not yet have was any idea how a piano tuner's income could ever amount to anything more than a modest, hard-working life. Emmett Voss taught him both trades that mattered. The first was tuning. The second taught more quietly. "You'll never get rich fixing pianos one string at a time," Emmett told him one evening, closing up the shop as snow gathered on the window ledge. "But you can get rich owning a little piece of everything, $1 at a time, if you're willing to wait longer than anybody else is willing to wait." He showed Walter a plain manila folder containing statements from a broad market index fund, the kind that simply bought a slice of the whole country's businesses and did nothing clever at all. "This isn't exciting," Emmett said. "That's exactly why it works." And only after 2 years, Walter opened his own account in 1976, the year he turned 21. He was not, by nature, a bold man. He didn't chase news, didn't check prices at the diner counter, didn't have opinions about what the market would do next week. He simply took a fixed percentage of every tuning fee, every repair invoice, every piano he sold out of the shop's back room, and moved it into the fund the day it arrived. He did this in good months, and bad months alike, the way another man might wind a clock. By the time he married Louise Carrigan, a school teacher with a laugh that carried down the block, Walter had been investing for 6 years and had told no one but her. Louise didn't ask him to stop. She only asked that he keep good records, which he did, in a series of green ledgers he stacked on a shelf above his workbench, one volume for every decade of his life. The green ledgers themselves became a kind of quiet ritual. Every December 31st, after the shop had closed for the night, Walter sat at his workbench with a cup of black coffee and copied the year's final balance into the current volume in neat, careful pencil, the same hand he used to mark the pitch of a tuning fork. He never showed the numbers to anyone, not because he was secretive by nature, but because he understood, even as a young man, that the numbers meant nothing without the decades of patience behind them, and that showing someone the total without the years attached would only teach the wrong lesson. 1987 arrived like a slammed door. Walter remembers standing in the shop on the Monday afterward, radio murmuring about the worst single day the market had seen in his lifetime, while a client's living room upright sat half-tuned in front of him. He finished the piano. He did not touch his account. That evening, he wrote a single line in the green ledger. "Bought a little more today. Prices are on sale." It was the only sentence he wrote that whole difficult month. The shop grew slowly and honestly. Walter took on repairs, then restorations, then a small workshop teaching local children the basics of piano care, which he ran for free on Saturday mornings, because Emmett had once done the same for him. He and Louise never moved from the small house on Birch Street. They never bought a second car. Their one indulgence was a week at a lake cottage every August, paid for in cash, planned a year in advance. Louise sometimes teased him that he treated their savings the way he treated a piano in need of tuning. Small, unhurried adjustments, made consistently, with no interest in dramatic gestures. Walter would only smile and say that a piano rushed into tune rarely stayed in tune for long, and he suspected the same was true of almost everything else worth doing well. Their neighbors on Birch Street watching Walter mow his own lawn and patch his own roof every summer, had no reason to imagine that the man in the paint-splattered ball cap was doing anything more than getting by, comfortably, modestly, like everyone else on the block. When the dot-com collapse arrived in 2000, Walter was 45, running the shop alone now that Emmett had passed on, quietly and without ceremony, 5 years earlier. Walter had inherited the shop, the tuning tools worn smooth by 2 lifetimes of hands, and one final piece of advice Emmett left folded inside the manila folder. Don't sell what you don't need to sell. Walter didn't. He kept adding his fixed percentage through the worst of it, tuning pianos through a recession the same way he'd tuned them through a boom, because a piano out of tune doesn't know or care what the stock ticker says. By 2008, when the financial crisis tore through Millbrook Falls and 2 of the town's oldest businesses closed their doors for good, Walter Hollis was 63 years old and had been buying the same broad, boring index fund for 32 consecutive years. His daughter, Margaret, had grown up, moved to Burlington, and had a daughter of her own. A bright, restless girl named Josephine, who loved to sit cross-legged under her grandfather's workbench, listening to the hum of piano wire while he worked. Walter's own response to 2008 was by then almost automatic. He had lived through enough downturns to recognize the shape of the fear moving through Millbrook Falls, the hushed conversations at the diner counter, the empty storefronts where the hardware store and the shoe outlet had once stood. He didn't lecture anyone about it. He simply kept tuning pianos, kept his fixed contribution moving into the fund on schedule, and kept the green ledger open on his workbench, where, if anyone had thought to look, they would have found a man treating a national crisis with the same steady hands he brought to a badly warped soundboard. Josephine was 12 during the 2008 crash. She remembers her grandfather driving up from Millbrook Falls that Thanksgiving, the whole family anxious about the news, and Walter simply asking to see the piano in a school's auditorium because he'd heard a middle C sounding sour. He tuned it before dinner. He never once mentioned the market. Only years later would Josephine understand that the calm was not obliviousness. It was the calm of a man who had decided decades earlier exactly what kind of investor he intended to be, and who no longer needed to relitigate that decision every time the news turned frightening. Walter kept working past 70, not out of necessity, but because he loved the work, loved the particular silence of a room just after a piano comes back into tune, that settling sound like a held breath finally released. He slowed the business down, sold fewer pianos, took on fewer restorations, but he never once stopped his fixed monthly contribution, not for a single month across 5 different decades. When the pandemic crash hit in the spring of 2020, Walter was 65 and had long since handed daily operations of Voss piano repair to Josephine, who had trained under him the way he'd trained under Emmett, learning to hear the same hairline dissonances, inheriting the same green ledgers, though she did not yet know what the later volumes contained. Walter, retired but restless, spent that spring restoring an old church organ for free, masked and alone in the empty sanctuary, while markets fell and recovered and fell again outside. He told Josephine only one thing about money that year. The people who panic are the people who never decide in advance what they were willing to sit through. She wrote it down carefully. In the same neat hand, she was already learning from him, though she would not fully understand what he meant for several more years. Walter Hollis died in January of 2025 at the age of 69 peacefully in the house on Birch Street, with Louise beside him and a half-tuned mandolin still resting on his workbench in the shop below. The funeral filled the small congregational church on Main Street with 3 generations of piano students, church organists, school music teachers, and neighbors who had never once suspected that the quiet man with sawdust on his sleeves was anything other than exactly what he appeared to be. It was Josephine, sorting through the workshop 2 weeks later, who found the shelf of green ledgers above the workbench, 49 volumes deep, and beneath them, in the manila folder Emmett Voss had once handed down, The current statement from the account her grandfather had opened in 1976 as a 21-year-old apprentice earning almost nothing at all. The account, built from a fixed slice of tuning fees and repair invoices, compounded quietly through 5 separate market collapses and never touched except to grow, had reached $4,180,000. Walter's will was as plain as everything else about him, a modest sum to Louise, already provided for by the house and the shop. The remainder, nearly $4 million, established the Emmett Voss Music Endowment, funding piano lessons, instrument repairs, and Saturday morning workshops for any child in Millbrook Falls who wanted to learn free of charge forever, exactly as Emmett had once taught him, for nothing at all. A smaller fund was set aside to buy a well-tuned upright piano for every elementary school classroom in the county that didn't already have one. Josephine kept the shop open. She kept the Saturday workshops running. And in the back room, on the same shelf where the green ledgers had always sat, she placed a 50th volume, blank except for a single line copied from the front page of the very first one. Bought a little more today. Prices are on sale. Underneath it, in her own handwriting, she added a line of her own. Still buying, still waiting, still listening. The town never called Walter Hollis a wealthy man while he was alive, because by every visible measure, he wasn't one. He drove an old truck. He wore the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation for 20 years. He ate lunch at the counter of the same diner nearly every day of his working life, ordering the same soup, tipping the same careful, generous amount. What no one in Millbrook Falls ever saw was the other ledger, the one that had nothing to do with pianos at all, quietly compounding in the background of an ordinary, unhurried, and thoroughly silent life. At the endowment's first scholarship ceremony that spring, Josephine stood at the front of the same congregational church that had held her grandfather's funeral and told the assembled families the only story she thought mattered. It wasn't about the $4 million. It was about a 19-year-old boy handed a tuning fork and a piece of advice he was patient enough to follow for nearly 50 years without ever once needing to talk about it. She told them that the fund would keep buying every month, in good years and bad, the same way her grandfather had, and that nobody in that room needed a fortune to start. They only needed a fixed amount, a long enough runway, and the willingness to let an ordinary life quietly do the work while nobody was watching.